Vice Chancellor, the Deputy Vice Chancellor, the leadership of the university, our Vice Mayor of Burera District, faculty and staff, students, good afternoon. Allow me to begin by extending my sincere appreciation to the university leadership for inviting me on behalf of our leadership, the military leadership, to address this distinguished audience of students, faculty and officials during the 31st commemoration of the genocide against the Tutsi, held here under the theme, Remember, Unite and Renew. My remarks will be structured into three parts. The first part, we will review the planning and execution of the genocide, an event that has often been questioned by many, a scholar or critics around the world, claiming that the event did not take place and was sometimes revised to suggest that there was a double genocide. So my part will be to tell you that story so that you can understand the chronology of events that led to the genocide. Then I will look at how the RPA carried out the campaign against genocide to halt the killings in 1994. And then lastly, I will explore the ongoing fight against genocide denial by these revisionists around the world, and the vital role that you, the youth, have to play in preserving this truth, this reality, and the task of shaping international understanding. So when I'm done with that, you will be the judge. So, genocide that occurred in 1994 was one of the worst events in human history. It was carried out meticulously within a period of 100 days. But I want to tell you that that was not the beginning of genocide. There is a long story that stretches from 1959 to 1994, when the climax of the genocide took place. And it is often that part of our history that is negated by the revisionists and negationists. And they want to associate the 1994 genocide with a single event of the downing of a plane in April 1994. So a review of our history suggests that in November 1959, killings targeting Tutsis were started in Aprosoma under Gitera Joseph and Peremohutu under Gregor Kayibanda. Parties, particularly in Gitarama province, following a political crisis at the time, extremist Hutus, supported by Belgian colonizers, ousted the king at the time, and this sparked a political crisis in which one group was targeted. The Tutsi communities in the entire country were targeted for expulsion. Many Tutsis took refuge in neighboring countries. Those who remained continued to be threatened and many times killed across the country. In this period, Tutsis were killed in Ruhengeri, Byumba, Gitarama, Kibuye, and elsewhere. But this is often not remembered because something more broad took place in 1994. And our mind just focuses on that event, forgetting the preparation stage that took place over a period of 30-40 years. That explains why many Rwandans went to countries in the region. Those who were along Mutara went to Uganda. Those who were in Gisenyi went to DRC. Those who were in Bugesera went to Burundi. Those who were in Chibungu went to Tanzania. So that explains why refugees were scattered in all these East African countries. And those who had means to even go further went abroad to other countries, Kenya and elsewhere, beyond the borders. So in 1960, now we've left 59, 1960, Tutsis from Bufundu and Bunyambiriri, the Congo prefecture, were killed and their houses were burnt, with many also forcibly relocated to Bugesera at a place called Gisaka and Lukumberi. This region was by that time a thick forest, so it was a deliberate policy. I should have begun by defining what genocide is, because at that time there was a deliberate policy by the government to shift a specific group of people to an area that was not habitable, a place where there were flies. Those who study science, flies bring nagana, sleeping sickness, and so both livestock, which they knew they had, and their own lives were at risk. So they were told to go to that area, and many died in the process. So that was already genocidal as a government policy. On December 12th, 1963, refugees called Inyenzi from different parts of the region attacked. They wanted to come back to their country after being expelled. So they attacked from Burundi in Bugesera. In retaliation, on 25th December 1963, more than 35,000 people were killed in Kigali, Bugesera, Cyangugu, Chibungu, Ruhengeri, as a reaction to the attack. Now, I want to be specific on this. When a community decides to react by returning forcefully because there was a failure to negotiate their return, it would always be an action by the government to kill the communities that purportedly support them. So genocide had already occurred. So it occurred in 1963. 35,000 were killed. But because of what happened in 1994, we often forget about the other incidents that took place before, which were at a grand scale. And by the way, there was also mass cover-up by the government, which of course dictated the manner in which the news covers specific events of that nature. My own father was killed in 1985. He was one of those refugees that came from Uganda when Obote expelled Rwandans from the western part of Uganda. So they went to Mutara. And so they looked at people who are likely to cause trouble, people who have studied, who have gone to school. So they picked him. And one day when he was in hospital, he decided to eliminate him without necessarily having to go through the trouble by an intelligence group called Ruhasir. So those are killings that are never registered. You see? A lot of those took place. People called UGHE were systematically eliminated in the community. But such cases were neglected. It was minor incidences. That is 63. 1973. when President Kayibanda was ousted by Habyarimana, many Tutsis were killed across the country. Habyarimana initiated the policy of Iringaniza, where Tutsi communities were prevented from access to education. In these schools, they would restrict Tutsis from accessing, and they had specific quotas. If they would access, it would be the very best. You had to work very hard, and many accessed actually Catholic schools and religious schools because they didn't have that discrimination. But government schools were no-go, you know. And from 1990 to 1993, we often forget that there were killings during that time. When the RPA launched the liberation struggle, Habyarimana regime started widespread persecution and killing of Tutsis called Ibyitso, especially in Gisenyi, which was a native area of the leaders at the time. So Tutsi communities were killed in Chibirira Commune, Gisenyi Prefecture, on 10th December 1990, in reaction to the October invasion. Something akin to what took place in 1963. Okay? So, lots of people were killed during that time. But you see, when people talk of genocide, they talk of numbers. So if it's not in the millions, then it will be called a skirmish. It will be called an incident. Sometimes even a civil war if the government doesn't want it to be publicized. You see? So 1990 to 93, I can go on and on. In Satinsi, Commune, Gisenyi Prefecture, I don't know if that's the pronunciation, from 6th to 13th December, many people were killed and their homes were burnt. In Ramba and Jichire Commune, Gisenyi Prefecture, others were killed, according to media reports and administrative reports that we found later. Bagogwe were killed again in the 90s in Ruhengeri, just after the launch of the liberation. 1991, Tutsis were killed in Karago, Mutura, Rugwere, Kanama, and Nhuri Commune in Gisenyi. Now, in February 1993, at in Mudende University in Mutara, in Mutura Commune, students were killed. Students like you, identified and, and killed. Now our president during the struggle, at the time there were these peace talks, he halted and said, if you continue killing people, we cannot continue these peace talks. So there was the famous 8th February 1993 attack on different positions of the FAR at the time, in reaction to the massacres. So I can go on and on telling you different incidences that took place throughout the country up to 1994. 1994 was just the climax. So when revisionists argue that what took place in 1994 was an incident that was triggered by the downing of the plane, they forget that the facts are very clear. Genocide passes through 10 stages, which I won't go through because it's a long story. But clearly, all those stages were evident in our genocide. So the climax was in 1994, when over 1 million people were slaughtered all over the country by Interahamwe groups which were trained systematically to do that. Pangas were bought way back before, because did they have time to purchase pangas as soon as the plane was brought down? No. They were bought from China in 1992, ready for the apocalypse, which is what Bagosora called it. And again, I want to stress that those who stood in the way, whether Tutsi or Hutu, in the agenda to eliminate, were also killed in the process. We have Agasa Wiringirimana and her husband, the Prime Minister who was moderate, killed by a group of soldiers. The kids survived. The Belgians were killed, trying to protect them. And many other groups that were moderate at the time were also eliminated. So anything that would stand in the way of the agenda to eliminate Tutsis would also be eliminated in the process. Okay? So, in 1994, our president gave an order. He gave an order to our forces with a dual task: defeat the genocidal forces and rescue people wherever you are, all over the country. We had several units that were deployed. The 600 was deployed in Kigali during the peace process, and they were reinforced immediately as soon as the genocide began in April 1994 by Alpha, Bravo, and 5-9 units from Jumba, Rutongo, Mugambazi, Karuruna, all the way to Sende. We also had units that deployed from Jumba all the way to Bumbogo in Kigali. It's 101 and 21st Battalion. We had units like Charlie, which were deployed in Musanze here, Butaro and Musanze. Then we had 157 by General Yinjira, commanded by General Yinjira, which covered Mutara, Kayonza, Ngoma, Mujesera, Gitarama, Butare, doing a dual task of defeating the genocidal forces and rescuing civilians who were threatened, or many of whom had been killed already. And then 7th Battalion took the Axis, Kayonza, Rwamagana. And then General Charles also, with the 600, was in charge of Kigali and the rescue operations that were taking place in Kigali, which was supported by Alpha, Bravo, and 5-9. So these units moved very fast to rescue people in different parts of the country. So by July 4th, the genocidal government was defeated and quite a number of people were rescued. Unfortunately, many died. We have reached a phase where all this is starting to be forgotten. And we have a group of youth like you who sit on their laptops in Nevada, Toronto, New York City, Brussels, France, doing nothing but trying to revise our history, to present facts in a different way. So what is our job as the youth, young men and women seated here? You have a very big task. I want to tell you one story. Even after the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi, there was another war by these people who committed the genocide. They are called our changes. Many of them came to these areas here that we are in right now, and halted a lot of activities. We had to deal with those people too. So there was a war that was fought But in fighting that war, we had to stand a very, very delicate balance or moral approach. The use of force towards communities had to be measured. We had to take very strong decisions. When they would attack our forces, they would do things that are unimaginable. Concentrate on a small force, eliminate it, and sometimes behead. When we would capture them, we would take them back to their homes and say, here are your children. Here are your sons and daughters. This, ladies and gentlemen, is very powerful. We had to make tough decisions. Our leadership said we cannot do what they are doing. Commanders on the ground were briefed. If you arrest these guys, please handle them with kid gloves. They are probably driven by an ideological background that was inculcated by their leadership. Some of them are very young. So we had to do a lot of work in trying to change the perceptions. And I can tell you, this was a very tough decision that we had to take. And results started coming in. At a school called UGHE. UGHE, you know UGHE where it is? Yes, there are students like you, boys and girls, who stood in unison. When asked to identify who is Tutsi and who is Hutu, they all said, we are all Rwandans. They refused to identify ethnicities. And that was because there was a deliberate effort by the government to change that perception, to eliminate identification of people in their ethnicities. That was powerful. We have them as heroes. The 6 who were killed on that day are heroes today. They refused to identify ethnicities. Now those are the results of a deliberate effort by the government to unify a broken society by taking very serious measures. Our president was very resolute on that. Any of our commanders, who by the way, understandably, could have picked up an AK-47 and eliminated whoever was suspected, did not do that because there was an order from our president to say, you cannot put the law in your hands. Others were actually pardoned. And then people would follow them up and say, why did you pardon X? Because he killed my family. There is a famous video of a kid who held one of the killers and said, Jewesi Morekura. Yanyichie, a kid, very young, 5 years. It was symbolic. It was symbolic. But what am I trying to say? I'm trying to tell you that in order to unify a broken society, there are certain decisions that we have to make. We did not carry out conventional justice processes. Because if you do that, you'll put everybody in jail 10 years max, 20 plus, or life imprisonment for that matter. But in order to unify a broken society, you have to take unconventional justice means through gacaca. That's what happened. The masterminds were held accountable, but those who are in the bandwagon effect, the bandwagon is following the crowd. Many of those were required to accept their role in the genocide, ask for forgiveness, and later on integrated back to society. You know the bandwagon effect, where everybody just jumps up the bandwagon and they want to do something because the government says they should. So governments do bad things. So the only antidote to bad governance is good governance, simple. So our president made those decisions because that's the only way we could reconcile a broken society. So when you hear people out there trying to change the story, change the narrative, what is our role here? We must carry out specific roles as the youth. One of them being, in the digital age, we must fight misinformation that spreads like wildfire. Young people can become witnesses to this history. You must share survivor testimonies, educational videos, and accurate historical content. We do not write history, and I don't know why. Most of our history is written by foreigners. We go to school, we study literature, we study history, we study political science and all those arts and humanities. But very few of us have to write our history. And yet you can get testimonies and put them out there for people to listen and learn, so that these incidences do not happen ever again. Dispelling myths and misinformation. It is essential to clarify that genocide was not a civil war. It wasn't. It wasn't an ethnic conflict. It wasn't. It passed through 10 stages. It was deliberate to eliminate in whole or in part a group of people targeted by the government and its auxiliary forces. Yet denial continues to threaten our remembrance and justice, even at the time when we are supposed to respect those who survived. We have one survivor here who has gone through a lot. I was told she's probably the only one who survived, right? I don't know. But it speaks volumes. We must promote education. We must advocate for genocide education in schools and communities. We must host debates, film screenings, and exhibitions. There's a movie called 600, you know it, which talks about campaign against genocide. We need to have more of those that tell our story. But I want to give you hope. The RDF is writing our history. The RDF has written the 1990 to 94 Liberation War history. It happens to be in my docket. And so we are trying as much as possible to talk to all the people who participated in the Liberation War to get different perspectives of the war. So all that has been documented, and very soon it will be in our schools as part of our history. We're a little late, but better late than never. Films. A lot can be done in that industry. Not the Hotel Rwanda drama that has a lot of distortions. We have to be factual. Actually, documentaries are better because you're talking to live testimonies. You're talking about live testimony. They're much better. In that kind of thing, you don't bring drama. You don't bring acting. You don't bring Bruce Lee and Rambo in these things. You bring real life stories. That is the only way you can bring out the realities of what transpired. We must support the development of learning materials and encourage visits to memorial centers. The RDF, whenever our visitors come to Rwanda, they visit the genocide museum, then they visit the campaign against genocide museum. And what is the reason why we have to go through this? Because when we are passing on the message, we are basically telling them that there was tragedy, but after that there was triumph. There was bad governance, but after that there was good governance. There was bad leadership, and then today we have one of the most celebrated governance systems in the world. I think going through some of these things makes you stronger, makes you better, because you do not want to go back to the ills of the past, to the failures of the past. So that is the message that we pass on to our guests who come to the Ministry of Defense. We tell them that we are changed people. This is the message we pass on. We also go through the RDF transformation journey to show that the force that stopped the genocide against the Tutsi in 1994 is now carrying out multiple operations globally to ensure that genocide does not happen elsewhere. From the jungles of Cabo Delgado to the scattered bushes of Central African Republic, our forces are deeply embedded in the process of stopping genocidal killings wherever they occur. While others are still dilly-dallying in policy and decision making at the UN, we are given the directive, we deploy and we halt genocidal killings wherever they occur. And that is a decision that our president made, because we know exactly what that feels like. We have lived it. The speeches in the UN and the resolutions that take years and years to decide on intervention, when people are being slaughtered, we were victims of that process. Yes. They actually withdrew forces rather than reinforce forces. The Belgians left. You remember? But they left because 8 of them were slaughtered. There was a government. You know, we have to explain why that happened. They were slaughtered. They were also slaughtered. But of course the images were very clear. People had to go to save face. Some went with their pets. That's the reality. While human beings were clinging on the tires of their vehicles, asking to be taken along. And by the way, when that happened here in Eto, the people you saw on those videos were all slaughtered. Those who are trying to cling on the vehicles of the United Nations peacekeepers who were being evacuated, they were all slaughtered. So we made the decision as an army, as a defense force, that wherever we are called upon, we shall respond in real time, both as a peacekeeping force and as a bilateral force when called upon by friendly nations, allies. So we are doing it today in different parts of the continent. We are proud. There is nothing as satisfying. It doesn't matter race, color, or anything. If you halt genocidal killings wherever they are, there is a satisfying aspect about it. So what is your role as youth now? You must fight to maintain what we have started. Young men and women that are joining the army every day, I can tell you, Vice Chancellor, that we always put a limit to how many people are joining our forces. The lists are long. So long. People want to join the defense forces to do the justified role of protecting what was achieved over the years. Both as cadets joining in GACO But even as graduates from these institutions, wanting to join the defense forces, to be part of the process of halting anything to do with genocide in the future, both within and without. So in conclusion, therefore, as members of a new generation, you possess the extraordinary ability to challenge genocide denial and to preserve the historical truth. Through education, advocacy, creativity, and connection, you can serve as agents of change and guardians of our history. Commemorating genocide, therefore, is not only Rwanda's responsibility, it is a universal moral obligation. Every word spoken, every action taken, and every commitment made contributes to global defense of the truth about our genocide. Let us stand as custodians of our history, voices of truth, and united opponents of denial and distortion. I thank you very much for your kind attention. Imana ibarinde kandi mukomeze mwige neza, mukundane kandi mwirinde ubuyobozi bushobora kubatandukanya. Murakoze.
So I would like to ask, did you forgive them because it was an order from the president, or like you had that heart of forgiving, or it's all come out of the order? I'm curious. Thank you.
But at some point, you will agree with me that it was very difficult for us to solve all those cases using the conventional means of justice. Actually, it would have taken decades, if not hundreds of years, under the conventional justice system of trial. So we had to devise ways of combining justice and reconciliation. I know there are many critics out there who are saying, no, they should have been hanged based on the systems of the US and the UK and elsewhere, and Europe. Because some countries still have the death penalty, by the way, by hanging. Some states, yes, we don't. We abolished the death penalty. But besides that, it was a government policy. I think the order that the president gave was about retribution. That's specifically what he was against. He said you cannot put the law in your hands. He said you can't. You do that even if you're emotionally disturbed, because it would have been understandable if someone picked his gun and reacted to people who he knows clearly eliminated their family. But he took serious measures against such things. That's where the order came. But in the conventional justice system, Gacaca was not his order. It was a necessity. It was a necessary way of executing justice in the shortest time possible, and to combine justice with reconciliation. Where communities would sit with their leaders in Nyangamgai. They sit in front there. They bring those people up for questioning. And then by their stories and testimonies, by the witnesses in the crowd and stuff like that, they would say, you know what, let's give him another chance. Some people were released because of that. Some were in those groups, moving in gangs, forcefully engaged in that process. Does that make them innocent? No. They are guilty as charged. But we had to make very important political decisions for the society to be united, and for some people to be forgiven, for the masterminds to be held accountable, But for the bandwagon, the entire group that followed those people, those ringleaders, we could select a few and say, you know, these ones need to be pardoned. And that's what happened. Okay?
Thank you very much. I'm Solange Moza from MBBS 239. I'm a student here at UGHE. Thank you for the wonderful presentation that you gave us. You reminded us that our main role as the youth is to maintain what is achieved. I have two questions. I would like to know if there is any good law or bad law prayed by doctors in the genocide. The second question, I would like to know what are the necessary steps for the youth to join the forces after graduation in institutions like this. Thank you.
Let me begin with the last one. You can join like now. Yeah. Of course, our selection has been increasingly rigorous. Physical tests and, you know, a lot of other tests that you do in order to, you know. But we are open, we are encouraging as many as possible to join the army, especially people with your skills. Doctors save lives, or medical practitioners save lives. So we want them more in the army. And by the way, the army carries out a lot of those things. Saving lives, we do that quite a lot. Wherever we deploy, both within and without. So we need doctors, we need people like you with the health skills. The first question you asked, very interesting question. The youth. What can you do? You said, I asked you to maintain what has been achieved, right? And your question was basically talking about what we can do in addition to that. Oh yes, doctors. Perfect. I gave you the example of my dad, who went to the hospital for a small ailment, and he never came back. Doctors could do bad things if they have that ideology. You see? It is not easy to identify, because it's a service that you render with a good heart. But sometimes, if you don't have that heart, you probably won't give as much attention to the patient. And so doctors were not spared, lawyers were not spared, teachers were not spared. All these people committed genocide. But I want to tell you that it is because of poor governance. It wasn't because of people. People are not like that. Bad leadership makes people do bad things. I can tell you that there is no continent that is immune. From Asia to the Americas they all, in one or another in history, participated in a genocide. So I cannot characterize genocide as something that is a preserve for Africa, or that, you know, it can happen anywhere with bad leadership. You cannot say Germans are genocidal because they killed Jews. That would be collective, incrimination of a community. You can't say Americans are genocidal because they killed Indians. No. That's collective incrimination. But bad systems kill people. Is that clear? Yeah. Next, yes.
For me, I want to focus on theme. First, my name is David. I'm from West Africa, Liberia. And you talked about Post-genocide. I actually grew up seeing the movie. And before coming here to school, that's how I understood the genocide. And you talked about it being full of drama. I never really understood the movie about how deep it was they visited the genocide memorial. So I wanted to emphasize on the point where you said that the army is rewriting the history for the Rwanda genocide that happened. I was hoping if you guys are also investing into film so other people can have the clearer picture even before the 1994 about those things that you explained in your speech. Are those things being put in place for that?
Absolutely. Good question. Yeah. We are working on a number of projects. Documentaries, I said documentaries are actually better than films. Why? Because you don't dramatize as much as the movies do, where a hero turns out as the person who saved the entire community. Even the fact that they called it Rwanda, a hotel, is symbolic. It speaks to, when you're talking about how many people, quite a number were saved indeed. But in what circumstances were they saved? It's important to get the facts right. And that occurred in several other places where the United Nations had access to. I think it was more to do with the United Nations, not him. He wouldn't have managed. It was the UN barricades that were stopping killers from penetrating that hotel, not the individual. That's a big lie. It's a big lie. He just happened to be in the right place at the right time to be able to take the credit. That's a fact. The UN at that time had barricades. So whoever went in, it would be difficult for them to penetrate. Okay? So that's the drama I was talking about. Now with the testimonies themselves, they give the clear picture. I have listened to hundreds of testimonies, recorded. See, there's one thing about not recording our testimonies, and you won't recollect the same information if you don't record it. You see? People forget facts as they grow older. So someone is giving you a testimony now, it will change every year because they don't remember all the details. So that's why it's important for us to capture in real time. My job is to basically capture what events as they occur today, so that today's events can be tomorrow's history. I wish we had done that then. We would have accurate info. But now we have to go back to review the past. Okay?
Thank you so much for the presentation. I'm from Nigeria. I'm a master's student. And first of all, I learned about Rwanda genocide in 2018 when I came for an exchange program here. And I visited the Memorial Center. And then later, I read a first-hand account of what happened in a book written by a survivor. And I know that after a genocide, one of the grievances of the victim, of the survivors, is lack of acknowledgement of what happened to them. But here, the government acknowledged it, and that's a good thing. But now I want to ask, apart from telling the survivors to forgive and allow these people to, get reintegrated into the society, was there a proper system of, hearing them out, fostering real forgiveness and reconciliation that will not allow them to, have this animosity that I still feel like one day I'm going to, revenge for this? Were they really heard and they sincerely forgave those people, or they were just hushed and meant to forgive whether they like it or not?
That's a very good question. That's what Gacaca is all about. Gacaca is like a community court where thousands of people stand there and listen to the testimonies of survivors and the accused. Okay? And so that exchange was continuous for a period of time. So, to answer your question, yes, a moment where tears would come out and people would hug each other after, would ask for forgiveness and say, I was misled. I really never meant to hurt you. I know it's the biggest crime that anybody can commit. I was forced by the mayor. I would have been killed if I hadn't. Those are the words that came out from some of these people who committed these crimes. You can only understand them if you are in their shoes at the time. Some of them had to save their faces. Young people in their teens. I can tell you today, we capture victims of that kind of indoctrination. Young teens in Cabo Delgado who have been brainwashed, who tell you testimonies of how they were taught how to behave. These are young men and women who are indoctrinated to do bad things. Now, if that kind of indoctrination took place, and here you are trying to reverse a long history of that kind of hate that has flown from father to son and daughter. It is a process of deliberate policy to erase that kind of behavior. So it's not something that just happens like that. It takes time. And I'm glad that our new generation is changed. The Nyanje girls, the Nyanje students are a testimony of the change in mindset of the youth. Okay? So we had enough time to listen to both sides and to create real reconciliation between communities.
Thank you so much. I won't take much of your time, but I wanted to ask, since you told us that the genocide started since 1959, I wanted to ask if maybe there has been any discussion to change the name from the genocide against the Tutsi in 1994 to the genocide against the Tutsi from 1959 to 1994.
That's a very interesting question. Brilliant. Personally, I agree with you entirely, because you see, genocide passes through stages. And from 1959, it was systematically accelerated to a higher level, from incidences to major, the apocalypse, which was the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi. But it was developed over time. It's not something that happens just like that. Okay? So brilliant question. But the nomenclature takes time to shape. Even the UN failed to categorize it as genocide when it was occurring. It happened much later. Even today, we have Americans, even at a high level echelon of leadership, who want to call it Rwanda genocide. Rwanda, as if all Rwandans were targeted. It doesn't make sense. There has to be a specific community that has been targeted in a genocide, not an entire country. It loses sense. It doesn't make sense. Can an entire country be targeted in a genocidal killing? Then it ceases to be a genocide. It becomes ethnic conflict. Are we together? Yes.
If you could help us define the word genocide, because sometimes the reason it's mischaracterized is because it's not properly defined in the minds of the people that do. And also, if you could just take us through some of the stages, the 10 stages, even if you just list them, I think to just the minds of everyone to understand it. Thank you.
Okay, I will try. As in academic institution, you need to define concepts for people to understand. Genocide, according to Lemkin, is a deliberate attempt to eliminate in whole or in part an ethnic, religious, tribal group by one, eliminating the group; two, separating communities. For instance, when they got one community and took it to Jesera, that is genocide. Three, I think, causing bodily harm and mental to a group of people. Four, separating, I think it should be separating children from their, I remember there are about 4 parts. I'm trying to remember. So that's the definition of genocide. But when they say in whole or in a part, that's where the question you raised is very important. There was a deliberate attempt to eliminate a group of people in a part before the 1994 genocide. So is it genocide? Of course it is. If I say kill all the Tutsis in a community somewhere and you don't manage to kill all of them, but you targeted them as a group, that is genocidal. People think it's about numbers. No, it is the intent to kill a specific targeted group, religious or ethnic or otherwise, or tribal. So it was important that you brought it. Now the stages, I don't think I would remember the way they flow. But there is the victimization, there is the dehumanization, there is the organization of genocide, there is the planning, preparation of genocide, there is the execution, and then the last stage is denial. So there are several stages. Okay? So it's those stages actually that prove that actually it was a genocide. ID cards, well, just to give you an example, ID cards were allowing you to identify who is who. Dehumanization, calling people cockroaches, Inyens, was preparing them for the slaughter. Because people would say, Inyens, Muyich, snakes, Inzok. Okay? Planning process, preparation, the pangas were bought. That is evidence of preparation. Writing of lists at the district level. That is preparation. Yeah? And then there is the speeches. The speeches on altering. Those are stages. And then the last stage is that denial I was telling you about, which is happening today. So, without following the chronology, those are the stages, and several others maybe that I may have left out. There are 10 stages. Okay? So thank you very much for your rapt attention and your participation. Asante.